In the scriptures, we're told that a man must die and be born again. There was a man who didn't understand and asked Jesus, how can a man die and be born again? Should he go back into his mother's womb? And many of us today are just like that man. Perhaps we don't say it the way that he said it, but we really don't understand what Jesus meant when he said that a man should die and be born again, to be born again in spirit. So the church says, well, let's do a symbolic dying and rebirth with water, baptism. The idea of baptism is that the flesh goes down into the water and is cleansed and comes out clean. And that's a symbolic gesture of what Jesus meant. But that still doesn't explain to us what Jesus was saying. And it seems that the church is satisfied with that. It talks about a lot of things. It does talk about we must cleanse ourselves and we must repent and show love and all these fine points of philosophy, but we still don't really understand what it means. And the reality is that most of us cannot understand. And the reason why we cannot understand is because it is with the very man, woman who must die that we try to understand. And so who is this man and this woman who must die? Who is this woman that must die? Who is this man that must die? And how would we cause its death? For such a man or such a woman would not want to give up their life. Self-preservation comes in. The instinct to survive, which is where most people are living today. But it goes further than that. It's ego. Ego must die. But that's a thing easier said than done. For the ego is the personality. How is the ego formed? How is the personality formed? Since we're little children, the minute, even in the womb, but the minute we step out of the womb, we're out of the womb, we begin to be bombarded by the world. The same world that the scriptures say belongs to Satan in a sense. He's the one who dominates it. It says, be not of the world, be in the world, but be not of the world. Well, how are you not of the world when your very personality is formed by the world? Everything that you believe, that we believe, everything that we hold true, all our preconceived ideas, our prejudices, our our distinctions. I'm smart, she's not. I'm rich, he's poor. All these separations, where do they come from? All this personality. I'm this, I'm that, I'm good, I'm bad. I've been deprived, I haven't been deprived. They're luckier than me. All these terms, all this terminology of separation, where does it come from? And it's what formed our personality. It comes from the world, from the people around us. As we grow, the sounds, the smells, the things that we see, the things that people tell us, people who know and people who don't know. Because everybody knows, at least they think they do, so they give us their advice according to their knowledge. They could be wrong, of course, but if we're young and formidable, we accept that and we take that into ourselves as part of, and we integrate it into our very being, and it becomes a personality. So we grow up with this personality, perhaps made of thousands and thousands of people that we've encountered throughout our lives. And everything we do as adults is first strained through that frame of reference, that program in us, and then our decisions are based on that. We can't even make an original decision because we're not original, not in the flesh. So we have this personality, this ego, and then Jesus says to us that we must die to this ego, to this flesh. And then how do we do that? Where does the ego, where does the personality reside? Well, it resides in our thinking. So if we identify with our thinking, with our personality, with our ego, how are we going to die? How are we going to kill that personality, that ego? That's like ceasing to exist. At least that's the way that most people see it. So there's no easy task. And we suffer as a result of that. We fall, we meet someone and we fall in love, and at least what we call love, our version of love, and it's all coming from ego, personality, expectations, and then and also a desire to be fulfilled, because there's an emptiness, an incompleteness in us that is of the flesh, because the flesh will never feel complete in the ego. So we fall into a relationship and we'll say, oh, I met the right one, she's the one for me. Oh, he's the one for me. Now I feel complete, and then they get married and a honeymoon happens, and then after a couple of years, we realize that we're not really complete. We don't feel complete anymore. And so our flesh makes a decision. Either say, well, I'll stay for the children, or I'll stay because we're financially dependent on each other, or emotionally dependent on each other, whatever. But there's no completeness there. There's still sadness, suffering, pain body is there. Or, we look somewhere else and say, I thought she was the one, but I think this one over here is the one now. And then we meet somebody else, and then we break up in the one relationship that makes us feel incomplete, to jump into another one thinking that that one will complete us, but in time that one too will fail. So we're in dire straits when you really look at it, you know. And of course, you don't have to agree with me. That's perfectly fine. But that's what happens. We're looking for something in each other that we can't really find in each other because it's all ego. The ego will never be satisfied. The ego always lives either in the past or in the future. Either it says, "Oh, look, I'm this way because my parents were bad, or I didn't have, or I was an orphan, or my parents were cruel, and so that's why I grew up this way." That's the ego living in the past, or the ego is living in the future. Uh, one day I know I'm gonna make it. I'll just really try really hard, and I know that someday in the future I'm gonna be happy, and so the ego is living in the future. What the ego does not want to do is that it does not want to live in the present. It does not want to live in the present. And the present is all we really have. All we have is now. Everything happens now. Nothing that you ever do in the past or in the future. You always do it now. This is all there is, this moment. And everything that has ever happened and ever will happen in this moment. And that's a reality that most people don't see. And they don't see it because the ego does not want reality. It wants illusion. So it lives either in the past or in the future. There's a stillness in us, a witness in us. If you ever close your eyes for a minute or two and you're able not to have any thoughts in your head whatsoever, but just total stillness, you will feel a presence there. You will feel an awareness there. You will feel the witness there, that which witnesses everything that you do. That presence that is beyond thought is who you really are. It is the I am in you. It is the essence of who you are. It is what animates your life. It is the breath of God that allows you to think, allows you to feel. It keeps your heart beating when you're sleeping. That is who you are. But when most people see that, either that someone talks to them about, let's say, meditation, or be still and have no thoughts in your head and just experience the stillness, the emptiness, the nothingness of that moment. And a lot of people try it and they say, well, that feels like death. And they're afraid of that because the ego doesn't want to go there. It says, oh no, that's death. You know, who was it that said that Descartes, I think a long time ago, said he took a year and he wanted to know what he was, who he was. And after a year of trying to figure out who he was, he said, I'm always thinking. So he came out with the famous phrase that says, I think, therefore I am. And so the world has adopted that as their proof of existence. And so collectively, the world has, for the most part, has locked itself into the ego, into the personality, into the very one that Jesus says we must die to. I'm not going to get really into the more profound parts of this today. But I will say, I will finish with a little story. It's actually not a story, it's actually what happened according to the scriptures in the book of Genesis. It said that Adam and Eve lived in paradise. They were complete paradise. They walked around completely naked, not conscious of their nakedness. They ate of the fruit trees and frolicked in the forest. Soft, moist grass beneath their feet. Perfect temperature. They just were completely happy. No, not happy. Happiness is the opposite of sadness. They were joyful. Joyful is a word that would more explain something that always is and not dependent on its opposite. So they were frolicking and happy, living in paradise. And then, according to scriptures, it says that they ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. And then they became aware of their nakedness and they covered themselves up. Well, they ate of the tree of knowledge of good and evil. Now, they ate of the tree of knowledge and good and evil. What does that mean? Well, for one thing, it means duality. You know, it means they're opposites, like good, bad, hot, cold. And the reality is that they found thinking. They began to think and become self-conscious and that sort of thing, which they didn't have before. They lived in pure consciousness. Like your pet. If you have a dog or a cat, animals live in complete consciousness. You never see a dog or a cat. You know, a dog and a cat will never think, say, oh, well, look at her. Who does she think she is? Miss High and Mighty. I don't like that person. They never pass judgment on anybody. They never, hold any prejudices or any preconceived ideas of how to live. They don't have any ego. They love unconditionally. That's why we love our pets so much, because it's the one place where we, deep within our I am, we realize that the relationship is an unconditional one. It is pure. They don't hold any kind of prejudices or anything. No, egoless, unconditional love is what you get from your dog or from your cat. I get from my dog. My dog lives for me to say, good boy. Lives for that. He lives for that. And that's why we get along so well when you get along with your pets. So, animals still today live unconsciously, as do plants and trees. So we did too. In paradise, in the Garden of Eden. Then we got to thinking, and thinking is not a bad thing. It really isn't. It's a good thing, but in its proper place. But we began thinking and thinking and thinking so much, and that after a while we began to identify ourselves with our thinking, which is nothing more but a tool of the I am. Something that we could use, just like time is a tool. It isn't real. It's something that we created to be able to organize our movements throughout the day and accomplish different things. So, this is the conclusion of this video. God created the heavens and the earth. Scientists say it was a big bang. From nothingness came this infinite universe. And it's still being creative and creating itself and expanding according to science, if they're right. And we are creative beings. And we have evolved. Oh, I know a lot of you may not agree with evolution, but we have evolved like the universe is evolving. It's a natural phenomenon. And this so-called explosion, expansion of the universe is the evolution of the universe, of which we're a part. And we are the highest forms of life on this planet. We have evolved. And God is enjoying himself through us. We are a spark of God getting to know ourselves. It's like each one of us, millions and billions of people on the earth. Imagine to personify God, because I don't like to personify God, because God is not a person. God is infinite and unfathomable. So imagine, though, just for a second, to personify, and that's what happens with religions. They personify God, and that's the fallacy of religion. But anyway, imagine if you were to personify God, and imagine God having endless dreams. Not just like we dream, singular, one dream. We dream of ourselves, one person. But imagine God having the ability to have billions of dreams all at once. Each one of us is a dream in God's consciousness, expressing itself. And one day we'll awaken, and we awaken back into God. So, I hope that gives you something to think about. Remember that the way is not through analyzing and trying to pick things apart, because more thinking just creates more ego. And if you're interested in hearing more of this, please make a comment below.